Thank you for tuning in to Exeter TV. Exeter TV is the town's public and government access channels, available on Comcast Channels 6 and 22. Channel 6 is your channel. If you have an idea for a program, want to host your own talk show, or submit a film, we're here to get your content on television. On Channel 22, we bring you live and replay coverage of government meetings and other town updates. A third channel, Blue Hawk Media, is operated by SAU 16 and can be found on Channel 8, with all your school sports, events, and meetings. You can watch Exeter TV online at exeternh.tv, Apple TV, and on Roku. Find us on social media for extra content. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell to get notified about live streams and new content. Tune in to our platforms every other Friday to watch the Exeter Biweekly Report with recaps of recent events, updates from town departments, and messages from nonprofits in your area. If you head to our website, exeternh.tv, we invite you to sign up to our newsletter to receive monthly updates about new content, upcoming meetings, and more. We'd like to thank you for taking the time to watch Exeter TV and hope that you tune in to our other content as well.
January 14th Conservation Commission meeting to order. And first order of business is introduction of members from my right to my left.
Trevor Matera.
Andrew Koff.
Dave Short.
Keith Whitehouse.
Valerie Fanger.
Bill Campbell.
Michelle Crapo.
Kyle Welch.
Dan Chartrand, Select Board Rep.
And Kristen Murphy, Conservation and Sustainability Planner.
And I believe Connor is on his way, correct?
Yes.
And Nick, maybe. Anyways, do we have any public comment that is not related to any agenda items tonight? Seeing none, let's go on to the first item up. It's site plan review and wetland conditional use permit for a mixed-use neighborhood development project at 76 Portsmouth Ave and Haven Lane at tax map 65, lot 118. And I believe Paige Libby from Jones and Beach is here to make a presentation.
Is Don.
Yes, thank you,
Good
Mr.
time,
Chair.
nice.
Paige Libby with Jones and Beach. Also here with me tonight are Jenna Green with Green and Company, John O'Neill, also with the development team, and Jim Gove, who is our wetland and soil consultant. So again, this is 76 Portsmouth Ave. Some of you were with us for the site walk last week. This is a 6.7 acre property, which is developed in the front portion as the current Fisher Auto Parts store along Portsmouth Ave. And there's this, let me find the pointer here. There's a man-made drainage ditch that sort of bisects the property into the front and back. So I'll kind of reference that as we go forward with the presentation. But what we're proposing here is a mixed-use neighborhood development with 36 townhouse units in the back part of the site and 36 one-bedroom apartments in the front of the site in a 4-story building, which will also have commercial space. This will be developed in 2 phases, so the back portion of the site will be constructed first, and the front portion of the site will be constructed second once the lease is up with the current Fisher Auto Parts use. We were on your agenda from just before the holiday, but after meeting with the TRC, we had some changes to the plans that were pretty substantial, so we felt that it was best to continue just because the wetland impacts did change a little bit based on the revisions that we made. So the major revisions as a result of meetings with DPW, Planning Department, and the Fire Department especially, where we added a second access off the end of Haven Lane here. So basically, the fire department will be able to come in and loop around at the end of Haven Lane, which they're not currently able to do. And then that resulted in the addition of 2 wetland crossings here. And then the second change, the second major change was the addition of a pedestrian crossing from the rear part of the site to the front of the site for pedestrian connectivity between Portsmouth Ave and Haven Lane. And there will also be a waterline crossing that will connect Haven Lane to Portsmouth Ave. That was a request by DPW to loop the water line as that's best for their utilities. So that resulted in a second crossing. Both of those are shown in red. And these will just be crossings. We won't be filling the entire wetland as we were with, if some of you remember, we were here in July with a different proposal where both of these areas of wetland were proposed to be filled. So with this proposal, the drainage connectivity between those areas will all be maintained so that it can still flow through those wetlands, which is the main function of those wetlands. And then the other thing that I wanted to mention is that the proposal will meet all of the town of Exeter as well as the state and HDES stormwater regulations. So in addition to maintaining the drainage, we're also enhancing the drainage by adding porous pavement in the rear part of the site, which will treat any stormwater from the proposal. And then in the front part of the site, we have underground filtration and detention. So all of the stormwater runoff from all the impervious surfaces will be treated before it's outletted into the wetlands. So we do have some buffer impacts, which are shown here in yellow and green. The green is the parking and structure setback impacts, and then the yellow is the limited use buffer impacts. I do have a revised plan that we just submitted yesterday, which I'll pass out afterward because I noticed we did have a mix-up. Actually, Kristen was the one who pointed it out with our legend. So I'll pass that out after this. We basically had the parking and structure setback impacts mixed up with the limited use, so just to clarify that. And then in addition, we also have a landscaping plan, which I don't believe we submitted last week, so I'll pass that out to you as well, because we're proposing quite a bit of landscaping along the edge of the buffer in order to enhance the buffer in the areas that we're impacting. So I can pass out the revised plans, and then, I don't know, Jim, if you want to add anything, or we can take questions.
Probably questions? Yeah.
Paige, I just have a clarification. Was it just the title of the buffers that were mixed up, or were the calculations different?
The numbers were switched as well.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, thank you so much.
And Dave, Nick is not coming
He's
tonight.
not coming? Okay, so. Kyle, since Nick's not coming tonight, would you like to be a voting member?
Sure.
Okay.
Might be easier if you move to the table. Do you want to? Just for,
He thought he'd left forever.
sorry. It's I know it's easier for filming if, most of the conversation is focused at the table. Sorry to make you do that.
Question. When December makes sense. Start.
So can you tell us what the square footage is of the buffer impacts then?
Yes. Let me just pull my plan out. Should have brought my glasses so I could see that screen, but this is easier. So the limited use buffer impact is 18,800 square feet, and then the parking and structure setback is 22,400 square feet. And we did have those broken down in the form that we submitted based on very poorly and poorly drained soils as well.
Well, when I look at this plan compared to the conceptual that you presented to our committee, it's a much bigger impact to the buffers. I mean, before there was only like a tiny corner of some of the buildings. I mean, like everything is moved into the buffers on that east side. And on the west side or the left side, also those have already also moved into the buffers, so.
Yeah, so the previous proposal was larger buildings.
Right.
So with this type of a development, the state doesn't allow as much wetland fill as they would for like a commercially sized building. So in order to actually propose this type of a development, we had to work around the wetlands that were there because we wouldn't be able to actually fill in that central ditch that runs through the property. So we kind of had to spread out the townhouse units a little bit more to work with amongst the wetlands versus filling in the wetlands. So it ends up being more buffer impact, but less direct wetland impact.
Yeah, the ones on the upper right-hand side, I guess I'm a little bit concerned about that because that drains into Wainwright eventually, which is protected. That's just a comment. You don't have to respond to it, but it's just a comment.
Yeah, I'm just going to clarify the area you're referring to.
Up
this
there,
right
yeah,
here.
yeah.
Okay.
Paige, could you clarify just the statement you just made about the state wouldn't allow you this type of subdivision to impact certain wetlands? The drainage ditch, that's the one in the middle here. That's why this area?
Yeah, is being maintained as a wetland versus being filled.
Why?
Maybe I can help.
I guess, and part of that is my concern is, I mean, similar here is that there's a significant portion of the upland buildable area in the central part of the site where there's nothing, that it's not being utilized.
Yeah.
And that is spreading the impacts to the buffers right up to the wetland boundaries. So that's concerning to me that we have a significant proposed sort of recreation area, I think it's called. That's the upland area that should be buildable.
So for the record, I'm Jim Gold, Gold Environmental Services. So this probably doesn't sound right to you, but this is actually what happens. So if we proposed a very large building here in the middle and left all the other buffers around it, the Department of Environmental Services does not allow residential development to do anything other than cross wetlands, all right? The years of which we could say, okay, it makes sense. Now, this is my view, okay? I guess because I've been around so long. But there was a time when we could actually say to them, look, it makes more sense to fill this area here because it will allow me to make more buffers over there and protect certain areas better. Now it's all square footage, okay? And it's square footage of their jurisdiction, not your buffer. Their jurisdiction is what they're looking at. As you know, they have very few buffers, except for like prime wetlands, tidal buffers, that sort of thing. So what happens is when you start to have residential development, the view of the department, and I'm talking about the Department of Environmental Services, Wetlands Bureau, is that they say, oh, you can avoid and minimize. You don't have to fill wetlands for individual places like that. No. You use all your upland, and we'll allow you to cross. Now, if I came in there, and let's pick something big, all right? How about a target? If I wanted to come in with a target and put it right there, the Wetlands Bureau took totally different. They'd say, well, you have to impact those areas, and so by all means, go ahead, file for them. After all, it's commercial, and so you actually do commercial totally different than they do commercial industrial, handled totally different than residential. And their view is big building, oh, you're going to hit something. So just try to minimize what you're going to hit. Okay, that's the rationale that's there. So when Paige says, okay, they won't allow us to do it, it's because that is the philosophy. In fact, that is even if you go to their they have a booklet out that actually talks about avoidance and minimization. That is what they actually show. Okay, maximize your upland. Don't touch any wetland if you can help it. If you do have to touch wetland, you do crossings. Unless you come in with a massive project that basically says it won't fit there, it's like that 800-pound gorilla won't fit. Guess what? Boom. They say, okay, now we'll let you do some significant wetland impact. So it doesn't somehow it doesn't seem rational to me that all of a sudden we basically are left in this position where okay, we maximize the upland, and essentially, unfortunately, the Department of Environmental Services, you can make an argument to them. You can say, look, if we fill that and squeeze that up, we'll be able to save some of that buffer, right? You can put that into the argument. I've seen it numerous times, conservation commissioners do this. They ignore it. They just simply ignore it. So I hope that helps a little bit.
Even so, it doesn't matter the wetland type, whether it's jurisdictional or non-jurisdictional,
You know,
or
well-
man-made, or the different.
They don't. And that's the interesting thing. It always comes down to square footage. As much as they
And
talk
if
about,
you could
we
avoid
do
it,
the
you
function and
can.
value assessments, right? And I look at this. Okay, so we have this, what one do I hit? Page, so I don't screw this up. That one there? Okay, okay. So right here, we know that this has very low function, okay? And it doesn't have wildlife habitat, doesn't have nutrient attenuation. It barely has any wetland vegetation in it, in the bottom of it. It's a man-made ditch. We know it's a man-made ditch. It's straight right through there. And the only function it has is what's called flood flow alteration. Basically, it means it takes seasonal runoff and carries it down to the major wetland down there, right? Down here, down to the main wetland area right here. Doesn't make any difference. Does not make any difference. They don't care. Once it's
Right.
and the argument.
What about
and
the
argument
upland area just north of that? Did you try to fit a unit or two in that
Oh,
area?
well, I'm gonna have to ask.
Why
Paige-
is that
Paige
open?
to take a look at that one, okay? I'm not the design person, but, you know, the interesting thing is, and it's a really good point you make. You make an excellent point, and it's something I've been trying to do, well, take a look at me, how old I am. I've been trying to do this for a long time, to make that rational argument. And you know, sometimes rational arguments don't work. Anyway, so, Paige.
Yeah, so we actually, as part of our previous layout, and I may be able to pull it up after this, if I can get the flash drive correctly without the help of IT. But our previous layout did have this building shifted over. It had a driveway off of this main access to that building, and then the building up here was turned to have access off of Haven Lane, so essentially this kind of part of the disturbance was gone. But as a result of the TRC meeting, the fire department really stressed that they wanted to be able to have two accesses to Haven Lane to create that turnaround, so that's why that was added. And then another thing that's been a big topic of discussion was the proximity of the building to the neighbors. So as part of the revision, we tried to kind of create this central area so that the buildings were all further away from the neighbors. So we're kind of working with a few different factors, and
Okay.
that's what led us to the current design.
Okay. Are there like culverted, I mean, I wasn't able to make the site visit, but it seems like this is sort of a drainage, a
Yes.
major drainage that's being filled in. But so are there culverts running underneath the development to bring water from wetland A across to wetland B? Or-
Yes,
Because
so,
it wasn't very clear on the plans, the drainage issue, which I know is significant.
yeah, so a few things are kind of happening. Let me switch back to the right plan. So there's a pond over in this corner, which is sort of off of our property.
Right.
But obviously impacts our property. So that was all looked at as part of our drainage analysis. But this wetland essentially drains to that pond, which then comes through a 15-inch culvert across and outlets
Oh, it
right
comes
here.
that way.
Yep. And then there's a 48-inch culvert that comes from Portsmouth Ave and also outlets right there into that drainage ditch. So all of that drainage continues down through this wetland in that direction. And then for proposed drainage, we have a proposed culvert up in this area to help continue to pick up some of the drainage that comes this way naturally into this drainage ditch. And then this drainage in this area will all be maintained to go to that drainage ditch as well.
Okay. So it's sort of going around the major portions of the development.
Yep, which it currently does anyway, because basically the portion of our development in this area is all at the existing high point. So that's kind of the natural flow pattern of the site today,
Okay.
is all down through here and then down. through here.
My other question is this porous pavement. Typically, you need well-drained soils underneath that, and I've heard a lot about. The soils there, you have the materials there to make that work?
Yeah, so we went out and did infiltration testing actually throughout in several spots throughout the site, and we were able to get good infiltration rates.
Speaking of the porous pavement, you kind of have it mixed with traditional pavement.
Yep.
How is that treated for snow removal?
So the pavement is sloped, so the sections of regular pavement are all sloped to drain to the porous pavement. So in the areas where snow is stored, it will be sloped to drain toward the pavement so that when the snow melts, it'll run into the pavement and then infiltrate.
Well, I'm thinking more along the lines of, you need specialized equipment to clean porous pavement. Are they gonna come in and just use that on regular pavement also?
Yeah,
Or
they would just
jump
use it
back
on
and
regular
forth?
pavement. Yep.
Okay. Anybody else?
Well, I guess, I know you're trying to kind of maximize your buildings on the site. But I just still go back to the buffer impact, and what I see up there. So I guess that's my only other comment, is it still is worrisome to me.
Is it still what? Sorry, I missed that.
Worrisome. It's too much of an impact.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Don.
It's Don Clement. I finally got in. It took a while. Sorry, I'm here.
Welcome.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm a little late. Question I have, and for the developer is, can you tell us how much of the buffer is going to be lost with this development? Square footage?
You're talking the buffer impact, or how much of
Yeah.
it is permanent versus temporary?
Both.
Yes.
Thank you.
So the limited use buffer impact is 18,800 square feet. And then the parking and structure buffer impact is 22,400 square feet. And then we have the parking and structure and also the limited use buffer impacts separated based on impervious and pervious. So I'll read those off as well. They're on sheet C3. I don't know if you have that in front of you or if you can see the
I
screen.
don't.
Okay. So the total impervious surface in the parking and structure wetland setback is 15,400 square feet. And then the pervious surface, which would be basically vegetated area after it's restored, after construction, would be 7,000 square feet. And then the limited use buffer would be impervious surface of 7,900 square feet, and then pervious or temporary impacts of 10,900.
So you add up all these numbers, we're about what? 40, 50,000 square feet of buffer impact?
Just about.
And this is about not quite a 4-acre site?
It's just under 7 acres.
7 acres, okay.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it is a lot of buffer. It's basically all of the buffers are there it would be almost easier to count where the buffer is. Are there places where the buffer is not impacted because the impacts extend to the wetland boundaries across the whole site. So I guess that's the issue here that we're having is, yes, we do on occasion approve buffer impacts, but I don't think we've ever approved all of the buffer being impacted across all of the site before.
The buffers are my concern too, of all the times we've done these things, and I've been around a while too. Why do we create buffers? And we don't create them to be impacted, that's for sure. And most of the times that I remember, you're cutting off a little bit here, a little bit there. You're not creating huge buffers over 1,000 feet. In this case, 18,000 and 22,000 or something like that.
Yeah.
And I just think we're just kind of throwing the buffers out like, well, they don't really matter. We'll count them in there, but they're not functional, therefore we don't worry about them. So I'm having a big trouble with those.
I can speak to Andrew's question about the buffers that aren't being impacted a little bit. So it wasn't on sheet C3 because that's kind of a zoomed in plan, but on sheet OV1. So this is the part of the site that's mainly remaining undeveloped. So there's a buffer here that's all not being impacted. There's also a large area outside of the buffer that will also be permanently not impacted because that will never be developed. And that is the portion of the site that really receives a lot of stormwater runoff from some of these developed areas on Portsmouth Ave. So that is where a buffer is really important because there's a lot of commercial development draining to that area without any stormwater management. So we're adding stormwater management for the area that we're developing, which will also enhance the drainage that's coming to it from this side. But this area will all remain as kind of an undeveloped buffer plus some additional buffer to treat some of that runoff as it comes through, just via a vegetated buffer.
So in your design, you had, last time we had a meeting, we had a lot of folks with a lot of concern with water in their basements. So realizing, of course, that's not your property, but this property here, what is being done here to mitigate that possibility, to make that, ensure that it's not getting worse?
Yeah, so as part of the stormwater analysis, we have to look at not just the drainage that's on our site, but also the drainage that's coming onto our site from off-site. And we have to make sure that we're not increasing the stormwater, the peak flow and the volume that's leaving our site. So all those things are looked at as part of the analysis. A second thing is, let me switch back to the drainage sheet. This pond in this area, and some of you saw it when we were out there, is currently not draining well. There's a 15-inch culvert that seems to be blocked. It was cleaned out earlier this summer, and now it's just blocked back up again. So as part of this design, we've basically noted that needs to be resolved because it's currently not draining. Even the other day when we were out there, it's full, but you go to this side and nothing's coming out of it. So that's one of the things that we need to do, and that could certainly be resulting in some of the issues that the neighbors are having with drainage. So that'll also be resolved as part of this project.
Thank you.
Is it beaver or you don't know?
I don't think so. When I was there previously, over the summer, or maybe it was September, it looked like somebody had just gone in with a machine and dug out a bunch of material. So it seems like it's either just buried or blocked up with a ton of sediment. So we'll need to figure out what's going on with it and resolve it as part of this.
Okay, and that's causing water to back up into that wetland A, that one on the bottom left?
Correct, yeah, it's better to see on sheet C1 here, because it's not so zoomed in. But basically the pond is right here, and it's kind of backing up all into this area.
And so that area doesn't normally have standing water?
No, not if the culvert drains.
So you're going to replace that culvert?
Replace it if it needs to be, but we'll need to work with the Thirsty Moose property and the other property owner. I think it's the Sunoco, because the property or the culvert isn't on our property. the inlet side of it is, and it causes issues for our property, but it's not technically owned by us.
Have you had any sort of discussion with Thirsty Moose or Graham?
We have not yet, no.
It's a large body of water. It looks, there's tens of thousands of gallons in there.
Yeah, and this summer when we were there and we saw the inlet end of it, it was completely empty. So we know that if it gets cleaned out, it does drain. We just don't know what's causing it to back up that way.
Yeah, it was dry. I mean, it's been a little wetter. We're still in a drought, but it's dry this summer. Kind of makes sense.
Well, I would think we'd need to know that you had permission to actually make that culvert functional again.
Yeah.
Because if you were refused permission, that changes everything.
Yeah, it certainly would impact our proposal for that building that's right there.
I guess, yeah, I have concerns about the level of buffer impacts, particularly the distance of, and I've said this in other reviews, where we have buildings that are right up against wetland boundaries. Because there's one thing during construction, but then people are going to be living there, and how do you control them? So I know that you might not even need a wetland permit. Do you even need a wetland permit for this from the state, for those minor crossings?
We do.
We do.
You do, okay, so you need a relatively minor one. But over time, I don't see how it's practical for that wetland to be maintained the way it's shown with occupancy of these townhouses, because people need space around their homes. And there just isn't that space provided in this plan to a wetland particularly. I know we dealt with this at Charter Street. There's townhomes put in there, and we talked about that. There was absolutely no like recreational space or anything there, and we dealt with that. That was those homes weren't actually as close to the wetland. They were actually on the upland side of the wetland. They had more space. Here, these decks are on, there's one that's on, the deck extends onto the wetland boundary. So I just don't think it's like the impacts you're showing here the impacts will be greater in real life than are shown here, because people need space around these structures, and there's nothing going to stop someone from cutting down brambles, filling in their backyard to increase their little 100-foot square backyard that they have around the townhomes. So I guess I'm concerned particularly about the wetland B, which is on the right side, which is the bigger, more extensive wetland that connects into Wheelwright and Swampscott, because of that's, I think, a more important habitat, wetland habitat, or wildlife habitat, wetland habitat. And those impacts in those homes with the grading is significant. So I'm not comfortable with the buildings on a wetland boundary, but yet no wetland impact is shown. I just don't think that's reasonable in the real world with how developments occur and how people live in these developments.
So you're zeroed in on building 5 and 6? Or also?
I'm looking at 4, 5, and 6.
4, 5, and 6, okay.
Would be, to me, if I had to pick an area that I'm least comfortable with, it's 4, 5, and 6. Because if those went away, it would feel like a lot more reasonable use of the property in a way, because you'd be preserving the highest quality wetland buffers, the highest quality wetland and the highest quality wetland buffers, where there's those, the slopes and the grading directly into the wetland. It's a lot.
Yeah, piggybacking off of that a little bit, the slopes, excuse me, on that site visit through there were pretty extreme. I mean, going into that, can you explain a little bit about the design of what is actually holding that back? Is that a wall, or how are those slopes addressed?
You're talking about buildings 4, 5, and 6 mainly?
Yeah, right along that ditch.
Yeah, so buildings 5 and 6, just double checking that I got that right. Those will be graded like as walkout basements. So the front of them, you'll drive in, then there'll be stairs down to a room off the garage, and then the back of the unit will have a room at the basement level. So the wall of the building will essentially act as a retaining wall. And the road itself will be kind of up higher along where we walked, closer to the elevation that Haven Lane is currently at. And that is buildings 5 and 6.
And 4, can you explain that one?
4 is only if you're facing the building, the furthest left unit is like that, but the other 2 are not, because the slope isn't quite as substantial as you get past that drainage ditch there.
When we were out on the site visit, the stakes, were those corners of the building, or do they correspond with anything that hangs off the decks or anything like that?
Those were corners of the building.
Okay.
Yep, and then the center line as well.
How big are the decks?
The decks vary. Some of them are 6 feet deep, and then they're as wide as the unit, and then others are 10 by 12, depending on which building.
Thank you.
So does that slope remain, just make sure I'm understanding, does that slope remain intact basically, or is there any kind of retention wall or?
Nope, there's no retaining wall in that area.
Really?
It's all just graded between the units. Just a little bit along the road, but not a whole lot. The front of the units will be raised, and then the back will drop off to the existing grade.
So you're not going to change the existing grade on the backside of the building at all?
A tiny bit, but not by much, just to make the buildings work.
Yeah, it looks like building 4 has a bit more fill than around the backside of building 4. The building 5 and 6, you're right, it's just sort of matching existing grades.
I wasn't on the sidewalk or anything, but that buffer on the bottom right, is that not an existing parking lot currently?
It is an existing
okay,
parking
it is
lot.
an
We showed
existing
it
parking
as
lot.
buffer impact just because it will need to be replaced. The building actually comes pretty far back.
I was just trying to orient myself, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is sheet C1. So you can see the buildings further back than what we're proposing, and then the parking lot is pretty much right up against the top of the slope. So the site plan for the front part of the site is pretty similar to what's there.
And then is the tree line proposed to stay between the moose and those buildings there? Whatever
Yes.
those buildings are, I might have missed that as well, okay.
Yeah, there's kind of a row of evergreens that's actually on the Thirsty Moose's property, so that's proposed to stay.
So that'll stay?
Yeah.
So there will be that buffer from Portsmouth Ave?
Yes.
There's a whole landscape plan that I didn't see, huh? Yikes. Thanks. Nice sneak peek.
It was just handed out tonight.
Oh, thank you. If I had been on time. And then that's a footpath. Okay. Cool. Got it. Yeah, it's all in the head. I think I'd just echo what Drew has said. The buffer impact is really the main concern for me as well. It would be, I guess we're calling it wetland B. I see how this was designed to minimize wetland impact. I get that from your point of view. I think just from the commission, or at least from myself, that buffer impact, if we can minimize that even further, I think that would be ideal from that wetland B. The wetland impact, I assume you haven't submitted anything to the state or any of that? Because
Not yet, no.
you would come here first, so I do appreciate that as well. But yeah, I'm really just stuck in the wetland buffer, just the sheer amount of it, from my point of view.
Anybody else?
Yeah, another quick question, and I might have just glazed over it, which is entirely possible for this evening, but could you explain why there's a switch from pervious to impervious concrete or pavement that goes through this?
Yeah, so in order to propose porous pavement, there has to be a certain amount of separation to water table. So we've put it in areas where it will work. And then we've also drained the non-porous areas to the porous areas. So that's really the reason.
Got it.
All right, if we've gotten through the first round of questions here, anybody from the public care to make a comment? Please state your name and address.
Good evening. My name is Michael Hauk. This is my wife, Danielle Frank. For those of you who went through the walk around the other day, I'm glad to see you thawed. That was a fun morning. Let's see here. We are the owners of 31 Haven Lane, which is actually the object on the top left of this map here. So we abut this property on two sides of our property. First thing is we'd like to present you with a packet which contains emails from all of the residential abutters of this project.
Thank you.
You'll see that all abutters are unanimous in their opposition to the project, as well as the request for the wetlands conditional use permit.
Yeah, I believe we had received most of these emails before, and Kristen had distributed them to the board, correct?
Yeah, this afternoon.
Okay.
Okay, we weren't sure if you had received electronic copy yet, so we wanted to make sure you put a copy in your hand.
Perfect.
Okay. Like our fellow abutters and other J.D. Hill neighbors that you've heard from, we're concerned about this project's impact on our home, property, and the environment. The developer is choosing to build on wetland and wetland buffer area. It is not required. In fact, it is prohibited without the permit requested. Please deny the wetlands conditional use permit at this meeting. Danielle and I have prepared the following statement for your consideration, which Danielle will read for you.
Good evening. We've gotten a little more information while we've been here tonight, so there'll be a couple pauses while I reframe some of what we have written, but I will open with a quote from the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services. We provide this not to tell the committee something new, but to reinforce what our state publishes about the importance of our wetlands. The citation is sourced from des.nh.gov. New Hampshire wetlands are of great importance for flood control, water quality, water storage, and recharge for both groundwater and surface waters. These resources are even more critical with the expected increase in frequency and severity of storm events associated with climate change. Wetlands also support the food chain, providing food and habitat for a variety of aquatic and upland plants and wildlife. It is found to be for the state's public good and welfare to protect and preserve both tidal and fresh waters and wetlands. These resources provide important functions and values, such as absorbing floodwaters, treating stormwater, recharging groundwater supplies, providing habitat for fish and wildlife, and providing economic and recreational value, end quote. Given this valuation, in 8+ years of our own observations as abutters to these wetlands, we disagree very respectfully with Mr. Grove's assessment that, quote, the proposed buffer impacts will have no appreciable impact on the wetland functions or the overall hydrologic system. The 4 wetlands on the lot are providing noticeable function to Exeter and the abutters in the form of air filtration, animal habitat, heat reduction in the warmer months, as well as light and noise pollution reduction from the traffic and businesses on Portsmouth Avenue. With regards, again with all due respect, to Mr. Gove's comments on fauna that, quote, wildlife habitat function has already been limited by existing development, end quote, we disagree. The pictures provided to the committee of animals in and around the lot prove otherwise. Environmentally, the wooded area currently provides Exeter, and more specifically, the J.D. Hill community with temperature regulation to help mitigate heat buildup. Allowing the developer to build on protective land further decreases this function and will increase energy and water usage in the area. As we've already discussed tonight, and you're all well aware, many J.D. Hill homeowners are already dealing with flooded yards and/or sump pumps that run regularly, and we're optimistic to hear that maybe some of the changes on the site will improve conditions. However, we are also very hesitant and questioning if the analyses done reviewed drainage for all the surrounding properties. And our question is, who takes responsibility for changes that negatively impact our property and our home? What about our neighbors? We request proof from the town and the developers that this project will not negatively affect what is already a significant problem for us, both in the immediate future and as climate and weather change. But let's just set aside all our feelings on the environmental impact, the ecological shock, and the hydrologic concerns. And we look at the plans as they have been presented. Where is the buffer between this project and our properties? Where are the mature trees, shrubs, and plants that will provide the light and noise filtration the woods currently provide? We are asking the committee to please speak to this tonight, and we request that you take time to do so in detail at this meeting while abutters are in the room. The fact Exeter has a conservation committee that is advisory to the planning board is a testament to the fact that ecology and the environment are integral to the character and development of this town. Do not underestimate how much we residents rely on you all to protect the land, animals, and waterways in Exeter. Your role is vital to sustaining our community. And if you're thinking that this is a case maybe of us being conveniently ecologically minded, I can assure you that this is not the case. In our home, we go to great lengths to limit our impact on the environment on a daily basis. Additionally, like many residents in Exeter, the mature trees and plants in our neighborhood and surrounding our property on this dead-end street were parts of our decision to purchase our home. The effects of this project on wetlands, animal habitat. We were at a meeting, I think it was the July meeting, and Foss Motors presented before Green and Company and Jones and Beach. And during that discussion, we summarized Bill's sentiment as, why do we establish specific wetland and wetland buffer areas and restrictions for development on them if we are just going to give permits to build on these areas? We request the Conservation Committee deny the permit request and advise the Planning Board against this project due to our concerns as outlined above. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I also have some comments. My name is Ryan O'Brien. I live at 20 Haven Lane. I have some audio visuals that Bob said he would help me with in a moment. But first, I have a couple of letters before I get to mine, one from an abutter who could not be here tonight, but requested that we read their letter. This one is from Catherine and Craig Boudreau at 11 Bonnie Drive. They live right here. To the Conservation Committee, as abutters, we have concerns about the proposed project for 76 Portsmouth Avenue. There is an environmental impact and the impact on the wildlife which our neighbors have expressed their concerns about already and which we wholeheartedly agree with. We would like to emphasize how delicate the water table is. We have lived in this neighborhood for 20 years, and before the drainage was installed in the neighborhood, our basement would flood regularly. But since then, we only get a trickle of water at worst. With such a delicate balance, I am very cynical that with the removal of the natural drainage behind our house, the water table will not be negatively impacted. Thank you to the committee for listening to our concerns. Respectfully, Catherine and Craig Boudreau, 11 Bonnie Drive. The next letter is a little bit longer, so bear with me. This one is from Tanya Lampy and Timothy Reel, who live at 7 Bonnie Drive, which is a little bit further down Bonnie Drive from where the Boudreaux live. This letter is submitted by Tanya and Lampy and Timothy Reel, homeowners at 7 Bonnie Drive. I'm sorry, I forgot the dear members of the Conservation Committee. This letter is submitted by Tanya Lampy and Timothy Reel, homeowners at 7 Bonnie Drive. Unfortunately, we are unable to attend the January 14th meeting. However, we hope the Conservation Committee will consider our concerns regarding the developer's request for wetland conditional use permit. We respectfully ask that you take into consideration the significant groundwater and wetlands present in our area of Bonnie Drive, which we believe it more extensive than what is known. Also, to us to share our experience. We moved into our home in February 2007. Like many in our neighborhood, we have a sump pump in our basement to manage the excess year-round water beneath and around our foundation. Initially, our pump would activate a few times per hour during winter, increasing a frequency during the spring, summer, and fall months. This became a normal part of living in our home. However, after the J.D. Hill water and sewer improvements project began on Bonnie Drive, the frequency of our sump pump's activation increased significantly. It began triggering 3 to 4 times per minute. We spoke with J.A. Polito, engineer, construction company performing all the project work on Bonnie Drive, who suggested that the excavation work and heavy equipment used during the project likely disturbed or exposed underground natural springs in the area. The Exeter Water Department later investigated and confirmed by digging a hole at the end of our driveway until they reached water pooling. The testing indicated it was not treated water and instead groundwater as the source. In January 2013, we again reported the excessive water issues to Mike Jeffers, the water and sewer managing engineer. Over months of correspondence, the town proposed various solutions to help with the water saturation. As the situation worsened, our basement took on water multiple times during multiple power outages. We reached out to the selectman and town manager explaining the excessive groundwater issue and how the J.D. Hill project left us feeling trapped in our own home. In response to our plea, the town agreed to install a generator and a 2-tiered sump pump system. The system has been a significant improvement in addressing our concerns. However, there is still an abundance of water in and around our foundation throughout the year, with our sump pump activating multiple times per hour, year-round. Additionally, the soil behind our fence and beyond our property line remains soft and wet well into the summer months. We have observed numerous wildlife species in this area, We have watched hawks and owls hunting rodents beyond our fence. Deer, coyotes, and turkeys also frequent the same area year-round. What may look like brush to some is in reality an essential wildlife corridor stretching between Portsmouth Avenue and across the area from beyond Haven Lane to Bonnie Drive. We urge the Conservation Committee to deny the wetlands conditional use permit, as we believe it will negatively impact the beauty of the surrounding area that attracted us to this town when we first chose to settle here. Granting this permit for housing development will inevitably disrupt the delicate balance of wildlife and further diminish the dwindling woodlands in our Tree USA community. Moreover, approving this request could set a precedent for similar proposals, further jeopardizing the natural environment we all cherish within this town. For reference, we have attached photos showing the volume of water our previous system managed before the current sump pump system was put in place. It is reasonable to assume that the same volume is now being pumped through it, though it is directed into the groundwater system rather than in our front yard. Our point is that if our 0.23 acres of land holds this much water and moisture, it is safe to assume the land behind us, the odd-numbered side of Bonnie Drive and Haven Lane, is also saturated. We believe this water settles into what should be protected wetlands. Thank you for taking the time to review our concerns. We hope this provides valuable insight and firsthand knowledge about the water table in our area of Bonnie Drive, which we believe is critical to consider when evaluating the developer's wetland permit request. Sincerely, Tanya Lampe and Timothy Reel. All right. I gotta take a breath after that one. All right. But did Bob take off on me?
It's
He
open.
queued it up behind you if you just
Okay.
turn around and click on the keyboard.
Okay, great. First off, I want to just say I basically reiterate everything the board has said about the wetland buffer impacts. I 100% agree with those, and I will take them a step further in my conversation. Let's start over with who I am again, since I read these for the other people, but my name is Ryan O'Brien, and I live at 20 Haven Lane in the J.D. Hill neighborhood. I'm opposed to allowing the conditional use permit in the Wetlands Conservation Overlay District for 76 Portsmouth Ave because there is no hardship forcing Green and Company to place 50% of their units in the wetlands buffer in the first place. This is a calculated, systematic disregard for the wetland setbacks. It is a choice, not a requirement. And I think that's really important to stress here. It's not like they have an existing building that they're being forced for some reason to expand, and the only way they can do it is into the wetlands. This is undeveloped land. They are now choosing to develop it in a way that is significantly negative to the wetland buffers and the wetlands themselves. I think just, stop right there. We should be done with this CUP permit process. But since I'm here, I'll talk about the animals in the wetland as well. Mr. Gove provided a November 2nd letter to the planning board, included in this packet. At first read, I walked away from feeling, due to human intervention, there are negligible animals and little value to the wetland other than a means for stormwater conveyance. I want to just click on the top. I got it. So, as you can see, this is a bobcat. All of my pictures, by the way, almost all of my pictures in this video is provided by my neighbors, and thank you very much. You all know who you are. I appreciate you sending them to me. This was taken on, August of last year. Let's just go to the next one. So this one's hard to see, but this is two coyotes walking through the backyard at 11 Bonnie Drive on January 10th, I believe. There was another video between this and the 14th of, I believe I was told there were 4 coyotes together, maybe some baby coyotes. This one was a couple days later, coyotes in the same backyard.
So you're saying this is like this, yeah, that was yesterday, 20?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that was
The
yesterday.
13th. yeah.
Exactly.
They have been chatting all week.
Yeah.
Going back.
Oh,
Yes, very
So-
loud.
So the thing that's important to think about is we have these rather large predators in our neighborhood coming and going from this area. They're not here because there's no other animals to eat. So this is their site on the right. This is their site on the right. And I've numbered, the numbers correspond with the pictures over here. On the day of the site walk, in their site, on the upper left-hand corner, those are turkeys. Number 2 is the location of where that bobcat video was shot. Number 3 is the Boudreaux's, I believe. If I'm reading that correctly. No, number 3 is the, backs up to their property, I think it's 36 Haven Lane. So what we see a lot of in the neighborhood is deer and turkeys. A lot of these other predators are a lot harder to capture because they don't really like being seen. Four are, is a turtle and a rather large snake. That's behind Daniel and Michael's house at number 4. Let's see, moving on. That deer is also behind their house. Number 5 is, again, listed up right there near the intersection of Bonnie Drive and Haven Lane. I've been told that that's a fish or cat. Hard to tell in that particular picture. Let's see. Number 5, that's a group of deer at that same location. Number 6 is just around the corner in a neighbor in the French's driveway. That is a fox. Number 7 is a picture of a coyote during the day, not too far away from this location. Again, turkeys, coyotes, deer, rinse and repeat. Further down, we have a rather large grouping, I would call it a herd of deer that is spotted in at number 7. And then moving to the right, we have more deer, and that one on the bottom corresponds with the coyote, one of the coyote videos we saw. Number 10 is a coyote that I saw marching, I captured all the way up at number 10 on Haven Lane, marching right down the middle of the road a couple years ago. I mean, that's pretty brazen for a predator of that size in a neighborhood like this. And then 11 is even further up at Len and Lisa's house. Len has a lot of really, really great pictures of birds. I stayed away from all the birds and the small animals here because birds are more easily moved around, and I think personally, I thought it was more important to show the ground animals that are coming and going through this area. So, from that, in conjunction with these maps that were made by Exeter in 2011 of the importance of different animal habitat, they list that red line that goes around there, lists an important area of animal habitat that extends all the way into the middle of their site, outlined in the orange. In the red is essentially an overview of the pictures you just saw, the animal flow through this site. So I just want to talk about that other one for a moment. So one of the things Mr. Gove outlined in his letter on November 2nd was that the proposed development will not cut off any observed wildlife corridor. So there's definitely an animal corridor here. I hope that I've proved to you beyond a shadow of a doubt that that exists in this area. And I believe that the two wetlands, let's call it, I think their label is A and B. B are referred to as the higher quality wetland. I totally get that. But for me, they're connected. This slim piece of land between them is, I mean, the turkeys and the animals, they're following right up through there. They're following that water channel all the way up through that upland and through, or at least skirting, wetland A before and after they come into the neighborhood. And I think that's really important, that you need to look at this whole property as a cohesive system for the animals and the water. So Mr. Gove indicates the wetlands in this area, due to human influence, have little value beyond channel flow. That may or may not be true today, but I think it's really important to look at this whole area as a single thing. So I've overlaid the contour map of this whole area, and it's not too hard to look at it and see how the water flows down through this area, this whole area, to this area, this wetland forest. Same thing along Portsmouth Avenue, which has been enhanced or disturbed, if you will, by human influence with storm drains and such. But, long before people were here, this area was eroded into a water channel and a wetland and an animal ecosystem that all goes towards Wheelwright Creek and out to the ocean. That function still exists today to some capacity. For Connor, if you follow these numbers, P4, P3, P2, P1, basically you're starting at wetland B all the way down at the other end of the property, and you're following this water channel, P4 to P3, to where the majority of the water right now is coming from, which is the 48-inch storm drain that you see there. And what is really hard to see is right in this vicinity is a partially crushed, I think you said 15-inch? A 15-inch culvert, which is providing very little ability to move water from that wetland A into that water channel right now. And I definitely 100% agree with the board. Something has to be fixed there, because I believe that rather large pool, as Keith pointed out, it extends a lot farther than I investigated up into that area. It's quite huge for an area of this size. No doubt is significantly contributing to the water problems in our neighborhood. So, to reiterate on some of what the board has said already, buffers exist to help prevent the negative effects of people, such as garbage, building compounds, lawn chemicals, and road salt from entering into the wetlands, and to protect animals who rely on them for survival. You can't build this close to wetlands and not negatively have human effects. It's not possible. Certainly not the way that they've shown the buildings. We shouldn't even be talking about allowing buildings in a wetland buffer when there is no hardship requirement for it. This is a calculated systematic disregard for the wetland setbacks. It is a choice, not a requirement. We shouldn't be talking about destroying the last remnants of animal habitat in this area. We shouldn't be talking about introducing an animal corridor blockade to divert surviving animals, and I say surviving for a reason. The habitat in this area has been diminished to a point where the animals are leaving their natural environment, the woods, and entering into human civilization. This is not normal. I have spent most of my life playing, recreating, and working to a lesser extent in the woods. Animals, the deeper you go into the woods, the less likely you are to see animals unless you're sitting there in a blind waiting for them to come. They don't like people. They want to stay away. The fact that they are all over our neighborhood says that their local habitat has already been significantly diminished. So we shouldn't be talking about creating additional water problems for a neighborhood which already has water issues. As humans, we spend so much of our time and resources creating problems we then have to solve, when the best solution is not to create the problem in the first place. And I reiterate that part, not to create the problem in the first place. We talk a lot about meeting requirements, about how but we often don't talk about how we can make things substantially better. We should be talking about how we can remove flooding in the J.D. Hill neighborhood, improve animal habitat, and increase stormwater runoff filtering. Mr. Gove's report doesn't support the destruction of wetland buffers. It is a call to action to fix the problems that people created here. Thank you for your time.
Is there anybody else? Nope. One more then.
Hi, good evening. My name is Diane Dam. I'm at 5 Bonnie Drive. I've been there for going on 26 years, and I just kind of want to agree with what they were talking about. The wildlife, I have had deer, bobcat, possum, raccoon, you name it, I've had it in my backyard, and it's wonderful. And I am very concerned about the water issue. I've had my basement, if my sump pump, a couple times, it's just cut out from old age or whatever, and my basement floods. I have a power outage, my basement floods. And I just don't see this problem getting any better with this development going in there. So I appreciate my neighbors, they're very well-put thoughts, and I wholeheartedly agree with them. Thank you for your time.
Hi, Len Medlock. I live in Haven Lane. So yeah, this, as Ryan mentioned, so the wildlife there, if I had night camera, I could actually take pictures of wood frogs, newts, and other amphibians. I thought I saw something about there isn't a vernal pool there. Well, the wood frogs do hibernate under leaf litter, and I am hearing wood frog calling, and I know wood frog calls, sounds like a little duck, from that area. So there's a vernal pool somewhere there. It could be sleepy, and they do, with the lack of water we've had, they come and go. It might be very low or very high, depending on the water table or the impact that this development will prove. There will be no water. So I just want to add that in there. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Steve Taylor. I live at 30 Haven Lane. I just want to bring up a point other than the environmental, and it's mainly the issue of this project originally started as MUND. Now it's been separated into two projects because of the 5-year waiting period they have to develop their original idea of doing MUND on Portsmouth Ave and using the land behind it to their, obviously, on developing it the way they want. you mentioned how the plan pushes the houses further into the wetland. Well, if they hadn't separated this into two projects, that wouldn't have happened. And that's all I wanted to bring up.
Jim?
So for the record again, James Gove. I think perhaps we need to go back and take a look at the actual parameters of the analysis that was done. And there's been a lot of discussion about wildlife, and I thought the cameras were great. I thought the pictures were terrific. I thought the documentation was wonderful. The only problem is they're talking about upland species. So if you take a look at the report, the analysis is actually wildlife habitat. The function considers the effectiveness of the wetlands to provide habitat for various types and populations of animals typically associated with wetlands and the wetland edge. So I go back to basically saying, yes, I'm sure there's wildlife out there. I'm sure coyotes are there, deer are there, possums there, rats are there, skunks are there, squirrels are there, bunnies are there, and none of them are considered under this form of analysis. It is those animals that either live in the wetlands or are associated with a wetland edge. So in other words, we're talking Blanding's turtles. We're talking, essentially blue-spotted salamanders. We're talking about certain snakes. And so that is actually what we're talking about here. Now, the interesting thing is that the folks want to make sure that they get that pond drained. However, believe it or not, if that water backs up more, you're going to have more wildlife habitat there, wetland wildlife habitat, because you're going to have more water. And that is the issue with Wetland A. It has been effectively drained, all right? You still have wetland conditions there. You still have the plants there. But guess what? A lot of the hydrology has already been siphoned off into where that 15-inch pipe was. If you leave the 15-inch pipe blocked, not sure anybody wants to do that, but you'll actually increase the wetland wildlife habitat in that area. Now, if we move over to Wetland B, which is the area that is shown there, interestingly enough, there has been so much volume of water that comes out of both the 15-inch and the 48-inch as it cuts down through that man-made portion of it, which, by the way, has been stabilized by everything imaginable, including tires tied together along the side just to try to keep the thing in its channel. It has actually cut a significant channel through the middle of that wetland. And it actually has removed some of the hydrology in that remaining wetland because it, in fact, has been cut down. If you go out there and you stand in the middle of that wetland, you will find a channel that's actually 3 feet deeper than probably it normally was. So I understand about the wildlife habitats, the wildlife they see. And I'm not arguing saying that, oh, they saw something wrong or they saw something that didn't exist. What I'm telling you is I'm talking about the wildlife habitat as based upon the analysis that you're supposed to do, which is look at the wetland wildlife habitat. That associated with wetlands and the wetland edge. So I stand by my report because that was the analysis that I did. Now, obviously, your role as a Conservation Commission is not to protect every single upland out there. Your role is, in fact, to look at the wetlands, protection of the wetlands and the wetland edge. And certainly, you know, that's a discussion that you're having right now, which I perfectly understand. But I want you to understand what has happened out there in these particular wetlands with regard to the specific question, wetland wildlife habitat. Glad to answer any questions. Okay, thank you.
Well, I was gonna say, the interaction of the upland and wetland species, they're not mutually exclusive. They're going to filter into each other's territory, so to speak.
Yeah, we actually are given a listing of the species that we're supposed to actually consider. In other words, this process, this analysis is actually the highway methodology supplement that is provided by the Army Corps of Engineers. And we are giving a listing of those species which we are to consider. All right? We aren't to consider deer. We aren't to consider coyotes. We aren't to consider those because they're everywhere. Yes, do they go down to the wetlands to take a drink? Probably do. But as far as part of the analysis of what that wetland is doing as a wetland, okay, that is the habitat that we're looking at. Okay?
Oh, I'm not saying your analysis is incorrect by any means. I'm just saying that I think part of our job is to look at this as a whole also.
And it is.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is it possible to review what our purview is with respect to these projects? Because it seems like there's a lot to consider here, and I think some of it may be outside of our scope. So I don't know if that's a question for Dave or for Kristen, but
I don't think we've gone outside our scope yet, have we?
well, I'm just asking.
Yeah, I mean, just to clarify, I think that's a fair question. So the purpose for this application coming before you at this moment, you don't have a state wetland application that you're looking at. You're looking at a local permit, which is a conditional use permit. That permit's required when a project impacts a wetland buffer. There were statements about the MUND. That's something that the planning board will address, that, you know, you're not responsible for evaluating compliance with the MUND. Stormwater, we hire our stormwater analysis out to a consulting engineering firm. We don't expect you all to be experts in stormwater. That doesn't mean you can't talk about it, because if you step through the criteria of the conditional use permit, water quality is one of those things. So it makes sense that it gets brought up. I really haven't heard anything that's outside of your purview, with the exception of the MUND.
Okay.
I would recommend leaving analysis of that to the planning board. And then if I can just get a clarification from Jim while I have the mic. Yeah. So Jim, I know the plans show John Hayes as the wetland scientist who delineated the wetlands. Is he with Gold? Is that? I'm just kind of having a hard time interpreting the wetland delineation versus your report and
right.
And just so that I can clarify and kind of constrain the conversation a little bit. And specifically, I keyed up on the conversation about wood frogs. That was a wetland-dependent species.
It is.
So I know the John Hayes reported or the note reports that the wetland delineation was done in April. And so I was hoping that he was a part of GOVE so that we could hear a little bit more about the wetland delineation process and the effort to look for vernal pools.
So, to clarify, John Hayes was hired to do the delineation before we got involved. And so that delineation was done essentially prior to our involvement. I was hired because of essentially being able to do the soil map, look at the test bits, and provide the soil map for the alteration of terrain. During that process, I was asked by the applicant, well, what do you think? Should we have the wetlands redone? Every place I looked at looked to me like his flagging was right on. So it didn't make any sense to me to have the applicant basically go locate flags where we're going to basically lay it right on top of somebody else's flags and then have the survey crew go back out and survey it. It just didn't make any sense to me at all. And his wetland flags, wherever I looked spot on.
Okay.
So to me, it was like, okay, if you want us to do it, that's fine. But I have no issue at all with the wetland delineation. And the functional assessment is not based upon the wetland delineation. The functional assessment is actually done at a separate time.
Yeah,
Yep.
agreed. I know part of the evaluation, even in terms of wetland impact and whether, anyway, part of the consideration is whether vernal pools are present. Our buffers change if vernal pools are present. So when you were out there, what was the timing of your visit?
Yeah,
And
we were
was it
not,
during
I
the-
was not there at a time when you could do a vernal pool assessment. Okay, I mean, if there's, the only time you know when the vernal pool assessment is exactly when you said. It's usually April, May, March, April, May. By the time I got out there, there would be no vernal pool assessment that could be done.
You could still assess for like a potential vernal pool, though.
Well, yeah, I mean, my actual view of the wetlands is I did not see any places which indicated to me, at least on the site, where we actually had areas, depressional areas that held water perhaps 2 to 4 months during the start of the growing season. I didn't see that. However, I say now you probably have it because the culvert's blocked. And maybe at some past time, that culvert has been blocked in the past, so it's caused water to back up into there and create a vernal pool habitat, and then it gets drained again when the culvert gets removed. I mean, that's the only thing I can think of, because at the time I was there, I had no areas that I could see or find that had depressional areas, that had clear evidence of standing water, 18 inches high, that would indicate a hydro period of at least 2 months, 2 to 4 months, because that's what I need, a hydro period of 2 to 4 months to have a vernal pool. So, is one there? In terms of the assessment, I can't say I saw anything that looked that way.
Thank you.
Anybody on the board? No.
Ready for motions?
We could go through the criteria.
Yeah.
I think that's the next step.
The conditional use criteria starts out, number 1, that the proposed use is permitted in the underlining zoning district. There were responses from the applicant to each of these questions. Their response to that was, yes, a mixed-use neighborhood development is permitted in the C2 zoning district, which it is. I would think everybody would agree to that. Number 2, no alternative design which does not impact a wetland or wetland buffer, or which has less detrimental impact on the wetland or wetland buffer is feasible. Before the board weighs in on that one, the response was alternative designs have been considered, including the design that was presented at the July Conservation Commission and Planning Board meetings. Since that plan, the design has been revised as much as possible and eliminated all direct wetland impacts, which is a benefit to the drainage on the property as well as the wetland connectivity. Although the amount of buffer impacts has increased, the buffer can be replicated with proposed vegetation in disturbed areas after construction is complete. Would anybody care to comment on this?
Well, I think our committee has a lot of concerns that there could be alternate designs to minimize the wetland buffer impact. I think almost everybody on our committee has said that they have concerns about that and would like to see some redesigns.
I agree with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think in July, when we had them here, we were concerned about buffer impacts, and they've only increased significantly. There was a reduction in the direct wetland, but that's actually not what we're talking about here. We're talking about wetland buffer impacts, which have increased.
Yeah, agreed. My greatest concern looking at it is the drainage rate not being, I am an engineer, I'm not a hydrologic engineer, so I guess not really qualified to speak on it, but by observation, I would say a huge function of those buffers is rate of infiltration into the wetland and into the channels, right? So you're losing all that. And that is what can lead to some of the flooding that people experienced. Now, there's other questions going on there, but.
Yeah, and I would just like to add to what Sean was just saying there, and it actually touches upon something that Jim mentioned a little while ago when we were talking about the actual function of Wetland B, in that in a lot of cases there has been a very significant channel that was cut out of that because of the amount of water that was actually channeled into that. In a lot of cases, these wetlands are really being used as a slowing mechanism, a sponge to hold water back. And in this case, not only are we sort of ceding the fact that like a lot of those wetland functions were dissolved away because of the amount of water that was already put into that channel, but we're actually exacerbating it by saying like, by the way, we're going to take this entire site's worth of water and continue doing that to a greater extent.
All right, number 3, a wetland scientist has provided an impact evaluation.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I raised my hand, but I guess you didn't see it.
No, I did not.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Don.
Yeah, I think we need to keep the idea, I understand that there's a huge interconnectivity between wetlands and their buffers. It's all well and good if we don't fill in a wetland, but if we completely impact the entire, the buffer around it, we're really going to render that wetland useless. So I think when we talk about, we're looking at the wetland buffers, understand that the wetland buffers, degrading the wetland buffers or losing the wetland buffers will have an impact on the wetlands themselves. They're all interconnected, whether through subsurface, many different ways. So I think we want to understand that as we move forward here and looking at whether, how we're going to act on the conditional use permit. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, number 3. A wetland scientist has provided an impact evaluation that includes the functions and values of the wetlands, an assessment of the potential project-related impacts, and concluded to the extent feasible, the proposed impact is not detrimental to the value and function of the wetland or the greater hydrologic system. The response to that was, a functions and value report has been provided by the wetland consultant and is attached. Overall, all of the wetland functions have been degraded by proximity to development and fragmentation. Generally, impacts to the wetland buffers will not have a measurable impact to the wetland functions. Wetland A's principal function is flood flow alteration, also known as stormwater storage. With no direct wetland impact, the principal function is not reduced by the development. Wetland B has more functions, but still has a principal function of flood flow alteration. With no direct impact, the principal function is not compromised. While other functions are present, the degradation caused by human proximity, water quality degradation, erosion of channel, and fragmentation results in that the buffer impacts on the functions can be mitigated by buffer treatment. Wetlands C and D are man-made and have very limited to no wetland functions. Anybody have a comment? Don?
There's a lot that I don't agree with on that statement. I think there is as I said, I believe there's an interconnectivity between buffers and the wetlands themselves. I think I think how we place the value on the wetlands, and again, no disrespect to Mr. Gove, because I've worked with Jim for a long time, and he knows what he's talking about. But we always would have an argument about the value of wetlands. I never liked the term low-value wetlands. All wetlands have values, and I think to call them low-value wetlands is kind of disrespectful to the ecological values that they have. So I would say that in many cases, the development or the applicant has not shown that he meets the requirements of what you've just read.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, I'll just reiterate sort of the creep of this development over time into the wetland areas as an issue that I think relates to this. And they're saying it's not going to directly impact the wetlands, but the proposed design, in my mind, will have direct impact to wetlands over time with use of the property.
I think we can take it, if we take it at face value, there's still a conditional statement in there which said if the mitigations. And I think that's easy to overlook because on day one, certainly, what about year 1? What about year 5? I think we've all seen properties around where those things aren't maintained or they fall apart or somebody deliberately destroys them.
Right. They do have operations and maintenance plans that are approved by the town, and they have to follow them just for their own. That would be a counter argument to that they're, the developments can have bylaws that require certain things. So there are ways that developments like this can restrict sort of the creep. But to me, having these buildings up against the wetland boundary itself with zero buffer is just too much.
Well, and also the ability of the town to monitor compliance over a length of time.
It's not easy.
It's not easy. It's, having the manpower to get out there and actually make sure these things are happening.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing that won't happen, but I just...
No. It's a good point.
Trying to be fair.
All right, number 4, that the design, construction, and maintenance of the proposed use will, to the extent feasible, minimize detrimental impact on the wetland or wetland buffer. The response is, The proposed design and construction minimizes detrimental impacts to the wetlands as much as possible. The design has been altered in order to eliminate all direct wetland impacts in order to maintain connectivity of the wetlands and drainage. The buffers will be replicated via proposed vegetation. The wetlands will be protected during construction via silt barriers. Comments?
I mean, it's pretty similar to the last one.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
pretty
in terms
similar
of-
to number 2 also.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, 3 and 4 are the,
We think that that the design does not minimize detrimental impact to the wetland and the buffer, I'm sorry, to wetland and the buffer.
okay. 5, that the proposed use will not create a hazard to individual or public health, safety, and welfare due to the loss of wetland, the contamination of groundwater, or other reasons. Response. No wetlands will be lost as part of the project, as all direct wetland impacts have been removed from the project. Contamination of groundwater will not occur because stormwater will be treated in compliance with Town of Exeter site plan regulations, as well as NHDES alteration of terrain regulations for pollutant removal prior to discharging to the wetlands or groundwater. Peak flows in the proposed condition will be controlled to match existing for all required storm events so as not to increase flooding to neighboring properties. No other hazard to individual public health, safety, or welfare will occur as a result of the proposed wetland buffer impacts. Number 6, the applicant may propose an increase in wetland buffers elsewhere on the site that surrounds a wetland of equal or greater size and of equal or greater functional value than the impacted wetland. The response, the existing vegetated area on the east side of the site behind the commercial buildings on Portsmouth Avenue is to be permanently conserved as green space and to remain undeveloped as part of this project. Okay, which we have seen. 7, in cases where the proposed use is temporary or where construction activity disturbs areas adjacent to the immediate use, the applicant has included a restoration proposal revegetating any disturbed area within the buffer with the goal to restore the site as nearly as possible to its original grade and condition following construction. Response, the included plan set proposes to restore all disturbed areas of the buffer that are not proposed to be permanently impacted with vegetation. See sheet L1 of the plan set. And number 8, that all required permits shall be obtained from the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services, Water Supply, and Pollution Control Division under NHRSA 485-A:17. The New Hampshire Wetlands Board under NHRSA 483-A, and the United States Army Corps of Engineers under Section 404 of the Clean Water Act. Response, all required state permits will be obtained for this project, including NHDES alteration of terrain, NHDES wastewater connection, and EPA CGP.
So I'm sorry, in response to number 6, and I probably just missed this, but is that eastern portion of the property being put into permanent conservation?
Yeah. Or northern?
We didn't plan on having it be part of conservation, but it would be undeveloped. It's not really accessible from our portion of the site because of the topography.
Okay, so the highlighting being it'll remain undeveloped as part of this project, but it's not technically under permanent protection.
Correct, yep.
All right. Anybody have a motion?
Well, I can say one of the people can change it if they want. I think it's pretty unanimous, but something like, we have reviewed the wetland conditional use permit application and are not in support of the application as noted below, because there are alternative designs that could minimize the impact to the wetland buffer. We have concerns about impact to water quality, especially the flow to Wheelwright Creek. And then I don't know whether we want to say something about how, you know, we have concerns about, I think the committee just said 2, 3, and 4 of the ones you just read. So that would be the motion.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Is it possible for us to just request a continuance? And then for the next meeting, we'll see if we can look at how to revise the plan to reduce the wetland impacts to that wetland B, and then resubmit a new plan with updated criteria?
I don't
Or does the-
I don't have a problem with the continuance. Does anybody else?
Are you looking at me?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's certainly possible for, we would not want a denial if there's opportunity, right, to modify something. I would rather that modification happen with your input than to go to the planning board with a denial and have modification happen without your input. That's my personal thoughts on that, but
Well, I think
it's up to you as a board.
It's practical and fair.
Yeah, I would agree. We did deny something at one point, and then it just kind of went to the planning
It
board.
got
and
passed.
It was, yeah.
You
And we
were
did.
cut out of the deal.
Yeah, we didn't see it again. And we did do a continuance on another project, and recent project, and we're able to
Yeah.
come to resolution with that. So we have done this, so.
Mr. Chair?
Sure.
I would advise you to be very much in favor of that, all of you.
Of which one?
Accepting the offer of a continuance
Okay.
and seeing a revised plan.
Yes.
You've done a beautiful job here tonight. You've looked at a plan that, was a 5-pound sack that had 10 pounds of potatoes in it, and you said no, or you were about to say no, and I think the applicant is hearing that, and so a continuance is entirely appropriate.
Think they'll take some potatoes out?
I would say. It's not my job to decide, but, so I would advise you to do that as
Okay.
your select board rep.
Yep.
For what it's worth.
Yeah, we're here to work with,
Everyone.
With everyone. Yeah.
But in order for that to happen, you have to pull your motion, I think.
Okay, so I respectfully pull my motion from consideration
Okay.
based on the applicant coming back with a revised plan.
All right.
One of the things they might consider is that it's too big for what is there. That would be only my opinion, but I think continuation would be good.
Okay. Yeah, so we'll accept your offer of a continuance and I guess be in touch with Kristen about when you'd like to reschedule.
Okay, sounds good.
Do we need a motion for that?
No?
No? Okay.
Sure, yeah, let's cover our bases.
Are they going to have to renotice the abutters?
So for the Conservation Commission, because you're advisory, abutters are not noticed.
Oh, it's just planning board.
So
Yeah.
it's just the
The
planning board.
word will go for it.
The-
I trust. The neighborhood's on it.
So what kind of motion are you thinking, Kristen?
Move to continue the application to, February.
11.
Do you think a February date would work for you? February 11th is the next meeting.
Yep.
A motion to continue the application to February 11th in order for the applicant to
motion from you?
consider plan revisions?
Yeah, we moved to move the application consideration to the February meeting of the Conservation Commission. Does that cover it?
Second.
Obviously, if they don't submit the application at that time, they would could be later.
March.
We'd be
Yeah.
okay if it was March.
True. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, that's my
to a later-
side note. That's fine. I don't think we need to modify anything. I'm all in favor.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Seeing there's none, passed unanimously. We'll continue until you're ready for the next meeting.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, could I make a comment?
Sure.
I continue to be amazed at the quality of the work that this commission does, and I want to congratulate you all on your deliberations tonight. It's really, it's wonderful as a citizen to see. And as a select board member, it gives me a lot of assurance, the quality of the work that's done here. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Can I provide a note to the applicant for coming back? I think it would be helpful to have some statements from John Hayes about the work that was done to evaluate a vernal pool. That could be a substantial change in buffer size, should that evaluation not have occurred.
Okay, yeah, we can get some kind of a letter from him.
Thank you.
I have a question as well. Can I ask a question? Are we meant to say anything about what we would want to see in order to what's it called, support the application? Because otherwise, it seems like we're going to be going back and forth all year.
I suspect the applicant has a good sense for where, unless, I mean.
I don't think it's really our role to be designing it. You know, we've given them our areas of concern. It's up to them to try to figure out how to address them. But to go back to Kristen's vernal pool question, or the person who did the delineation, do you have any idea where you think that vernal pool is? No, I'm not asking you, John, that's the gentleman.
I've lived in the area 23 years.
Yeah,
So it depends on.
on the season,
It's seasonal, sometimes.
but
there is a
it
one.
must be in a certain area, correct?
The fact that I'm hearing wood frogs
Yeah,
in April, there's something's out there.
yep, okay,
And not spring peepers, I mean, they're there, wood frogs.
yep.
Not Blandy's turtle, not ribbon snake, none of the other obligatory species that are there, but I don't have night vision goggles, I don't know what's there. But I appreciate your comment that the habitats mingle.
Yeah.
It's not a zoo, they do mingle, the habitats work together, thank you.
Well, thank you for everybody coming tonight, and I'm sure you'll hear.
Don's on the.
Does Don want to say something? One more.
No.
No,
Danielle?
go ahead.
I was just wondering if.
I think it would be helpful, sorry, to pass them, yeah, or come to the table.
Danielle from 31 Haven Lane, does this affect the planning board meeting next week?
No, the planning board could continue to meet. That's up to the applicant, depending on the revised plans. I think that getting feedback from both boards would be helpful. They would just defer action on the conditional use permit component, depending on the redesign. It's really the call of the applicant. They might want to hear comments from the planning board as well before they go through the effort to redesign.
All right. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah.
No, it's called the home stretch.
It's 2, 3, 4, 5. We gotta stand up.
All right.
You can run now, huh? Is that 8 miles or more? Awesome. Good to see you back up. Faster too. Feels like it's never going to get back to it, I think, after you.
I don't think it's going away anytime soon.
Yeah, I know.
Unless they reduce the density.
You tell me.
Here's the thing.
You're welcome. And I can do that.
Bilbo Baggins.
Prefer a paper copy.
Yeah, that's a home stretch. All right, here we go. Just trying to have a good time. Why do you record with
No, like,
it's a little shot of water?
Mine's working.
chilly in the west.
Okay, well, let me know. Yeah, I don't mind. And Valerie, same for you. If you have copies of things you want to distribute to the board, let me know.
I have
Send it to
blue,
me
I
and I'll
have here.
print it out. You shouldn't pay
Yeah,
out of your
well, I've got a color printer at home, so it's not, but thank you.
And I love double trouble.
It was one of my, I think I probably put it on Strava. Yeah.
Okay, good night.
But, yeah, at the end of the day, too. It was amazing.
All right. Great Next item is, Michelle has been doing some land use change tax research and came up with an interesting analysis. It's not a big deal, but it's pretty informative, so. Could we hear
Yeah,
it?
I started with the New Hampshire Association of Conservation Commissions. They had a webinar. So I started there to see what other towns have done. And it was precipitated because we went to the annual meeting and they showed us, I don't know if you all have this, of which towns and the percent they're getting from the land use tax change. So I looked at that and I did a pro forma based on what I did was copy what other towns do. They don't take all the money from the change tax. They might take a portion, like we often get $50,000. So I said 50% or $50,000. And so I figured out what we would gain from that. So that's the proposed, and that's capped at 50% or $50,000. And then I looked at the actual, and the actual, this town is, I will say, they're very generous in giving us money every year, voting, and they've given us 2020, $50,000, 21, $50,000. In 22, we got 149,000. Some of that was specifically for Rains Barn. And then 2023, we got $50,000. And I don't think we proposed anything for this year on the warrant. But that brings us more money than actually if we went and put our the change tax. We get more money how the town votes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
Yeah,
I
it does,
think
but it wouldn't preclude us from, we could have part of the land use change tax, and if we need additional funds.
Vote, yes.
But
And it
go
used to
through the
be,
warrant article
the
process,
former
right?
master plan, it said the town has not elected to take advantage of this change in the use tax at this point. That was not the recent master plan, but the master plan before that.
Okay.
So at this point, I mean, if we saw the need, I guess we have that option to put that before the voters, but at this point, we're getting more money just having the voters decide. And I actually, I think I like that the voters get a chance to vote how their tax dollars are spent. I think this town, we do a good job with that, and I think I'd like to, at this point, maybe continue doing that.
Well, and even something like this year, not asking for anything, it gives you more credibility in future years.
Yeah.
If something comes along where you need it,
Right.
we're not just grabbing.
Yeah.
Right.
Could I provide some information to that,
Yes.
please?
Yes, Don?
About 15 years ago, the Conservation Commission put forth a warrant article to actually request 50% of the land use tax be put in the conservation fund. And that warrant article was defeated. And a lot of the discussion around that time was, again, that very thing we're talking about now, is that over many, many years, when the Conservation Commission needed money or wanted money, they went to the town with a separate warrant article, and the town has always been extremely generous in providing those funds. Yeah. So that was one of the reasons why the warrant article that we put together about 15 years ago for the land use tax, change tax, did not pass. So it would have to be put as a warrant article, and I think that's too late to do that this year anyways. So just a little history.
You can go back even further, not quite to John Wheelwright, but back at least 90s, we went through the same discussion and decided that 50,000 a year that we could count on, because at that time in the 90s, a lot of land was becoming available, that 50,000 a year was better.
Yeah.
And then when like rains came up, we went for 100,000 because we had a real goal. So I'd go with
One thing we should may be mindful of when we might, if we ever see a real estate correction, it might be a time to start thinking about acquiring more land or see if there's more land out there. Because honestly, the town of Amherst spent $7 million acquiring 230 acres, which is about $30,000 an acre. And that's a lot of money for, conservation land.
I can remember we had a list at one point of lands that we thought which weren't necessarily available then, but we wanted to keep an eye on.
Keep an eye on. Right now, we have 23% of the land in town is
We've done pretty well, but
under current use, yeah.
We did go through an exercise, this was not that long ago, I would say 2018 or 19, maybe, 18 or 19, where we had a member of the commission look at all of the property in town and rank those parcels that are undeveloped based on the qualifications that the ARM grant uses to define a good project. And so it was sort of like a way to prioritize those projects that are highly likely to be well qualified for an ARM grant, the Aquatic Resource Mitigation Fund. That's that pot of money that when mitigation happens, the applicant just pays their in lieu fee and the money goes away. You have an opportunity to apply for those grant dollars for a project. So from that, we reached out to the property owners. I think it was like the top 10 property owners, just hey, if you're considering, conserving your property, please contact the Conservation Commission. Maybe it's a time to have a subset of this group relook at that list and maybe do a connection again with them. It's nice to just have those touch points over the years because family issues change and, situations change, and it's nice when they have a point of contact with the town. So it could be we really have all the information we need to in order to reach out again. If that's something the board is interested in, I'd be happy to work with someone to set something up for review and discussion at a future meeting.
To fill your spare time, right? Yes.
I think that's a good idea. I remember when that happened and thinking that was smart idea.
It was 2018, was it?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, and do we know what properties are still in current use that could be developed? Because that was another, I think, thing we looked at is how many are left in current use that could still be further developed. Because some of them may not just stay that way forever and may never.
Yeah.
Well, and what's also contiguous to other stuff that we already have.
Right.
That's always nice.
Yeah.
Instead of isolated islands.
I guess with the land use change tax versus going to warrant articles, the problem we've had is we need money available so that we can strike when there's an opportunity, because like right now if we reach out to one of these properties this month and they say, oh yeah, I'd love to conserve it. Well, we would have to go and say, okay, we can come back to you in March 2026 and we might have money then.
Don't get me started on our form of government. Don't get me started.
So if we, right now, we don't have a lot of money in our conservation fund to really do anything meaningful with. And we don't have anything proposed this year. So
Well, a good example of that
The
is-
land use change tax is sort of rolling, right? So whenever they pay it, it would kind of then get put instantly into or rather
Yeah.
quickly into the conservation fund. So that would, I don't know, that having these different revenue sources could be a way for us to manage that challenge of having money available and also relying on voters to approve funds. So I don't know, that's my,
But the voters did say no.
but the voters did say no last time.
Voters did say no, but if this is true, the estimate for the revenue for the land use change tax revenue this year, the estimate is $325,000. So if we got 50% of that, but,
Well, and I'll say this town has changed quite a bit. I've been here 12 years.
yeah.
And when I moved here in 2012, it feels different today than it does then. And there's different demographics. So
Yeah.
I guess just that it got failed 15 years ago, I don't know. We've done really well in any conservation-related warrant article. So we have a recent strong track record in the town approving whatever we put on related to conservation, because I think as town people see a desire for additional conservation in this town.
It's true.
And I guess I wonder, do all members understand this land? We kind of jumped midway into the conversation, but did anyone need a little background on what we're talking about, or?
To the current use program, what that is?
Sean, yeah?
I'm the only one.
No, it's okay. I
No.
think it's helpful.
I can
So-
talk about it.
so
My
basically-
property is actually in current
Okay.
use. I own
Yeah.
12 acres of land. It's a minimum of 10 acres, so you need to own 10 acres of undeveloped land. And to be in it, you can obviously have more. And so that 10 acres that's in current use of my 12, so I have 2 that aren't in current use and 10 that are. For those 10 acres, I pay reduced property taxes, like significantly reduced. So it's a major benefit for my property because I'm paying less property taxes. But
Compared to if it was attached to your.
compared to if it was just normal land. But that land has to stay in its current use, meaning it's undeveloped. And it can be wetland, it can be upland. The moment I want to go and say, I'm going to go put a big subdivision on this, on those 10 acres, I would have to take it out of current use. And then I would have to go and they would do the math and say, okay, you've had this property in current use for 10 years. You saved, $20,000 in property taxes over that time on the land, because your land valuation was lower, right? So you should have paid $20,000 more. You owe us $20,000. And that $20,000 is what's called the land use change tax. So it's sort of bringing you back to where you would have been had your property never been in current use.
I thought it was based on 10% of the land valuation.
10% of the market.
Yeah.
Okay, I was maybe wrong on some of the details,
Yeah,
but that's
but
my
that's
sense of how
general,
it works.
yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
10 acres specifically.
Yeah.
Or more.
Yeah.
Or
10 or
more.
more.
So you can't put like an acre in current use.
And so the map that Michelle was referencing shows, and New Hampshire Association of Conservation Commissions puts this out, and it's a map that shows what communities receive 100% of their land use change tax for their conservation fund, that's the dark green, and then that goes all the way down to red, which is 0. So we can pass that around, but
And that
just,
means the other towns use that money for something else.
they use it for conservation. Or
No, the red ones.
Oh, the red ones
Don't.
do what Exeter does, so that
Just
land
goes
use
into our
change
general
tax goes
fund.
into
Goes into our general fund.
offsetting tax impact, yeah.
Right. Brian, you had a question?
I would like to speak a
Take-
little bit on this. Again, my name's Ryan O'Brien from 20 Haven Lane. In a past life, I served on a conservation board for a short period of time in a different town. And our town had a really difficult tax situation. We had way too much tax burden for the amount of services that we were providing. And so nothing ever passed over and above the default budget in our town for years going. unfortunately, having lived here for 5 years, I feel that that situation may be going, we may be going in that direction in Exeter. The taxes have gone up quite a bit in the 5 years that I've owned a house here. And I know for a fact that there are a lot of very, very angry people in town right now about the new assessments and in the state of town. People who have lived here their whole life have seen the dramatic shift to these large structures, destroying forests and habitat, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of very angry people about this right now. And I do fear that we're moving in the direction of a rejection of all budgets, all warrant articles as a result of that. So, you know, you answered one of my questions I had was what happens to that money in town? So we, in the board that I served on, we had no ability to basically do anything in terms of purchasing land or protecting land because we had no money. It's great that the town currently gives you money, but I would not consider past as a guarantee of future. And I would seriously consider trying to get a warrant article passed to get at least part of those funds directed into your account so that, like Andrew said, you can pounce when you need to. Recently, there was 140-something acres, and Kristen, you can probably speak to this better than I can. It was sort of on the north end of town that was, the property owner was willing to put that
property.
What was
The
it?
rug.
Perhaps, I'm not sure, but I think it was partly in Newfields and partly in
Yeah, it was a rug
Exeter.
prop.
Yeah. The reason I was on the Conservation Commission in the first place was because I was very involved with the Recreation Department and building trails. And so building trails sort of fell under the Conservation Commission, and I was the recreation guy on the Conservation Commission for that reason. From a recreation standpoint, I am a big, and an animal habitat standpoint, I am a big proponent of blocks of land that are contiguous. While it's great to protect a little piece here and a little piece there, and I'm a big proponent of trying to connect those dots with trails and stuff, it's the best situation you can have is to protect the block, that big block of land. And so having money in a budget ready to pounce when those opportunities come up, I think is absolutely vital to get things done in that regard. So for what it's worth, I wanted to share those thoughts on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
One thing I wanted to say is, we could, look at this, review it again at the end of the year, because this would not go on to the warrant until 2026, if we so choose. But I think if we did do a warrant article, you'd probably have to say to the people, this is going to impact your taxes, as we see in the warrant articles. 3 cents a thousand, or whatever. I mean, I would think you would have to do that. So.
I don't know.
I don't know.
Would it cost?
'Cause
It's
now-
not a cost.
Would it
You're
impact
taking money
taxes?
from the general, that's why I'm curious, because maybe you could talk to the treasurer, because you're taking money from the general
Yeah,
expenditures, and,
Well, this is a perfectly reasonable thing for this commission to consider. If you are serious about doing it, I would urge you to have a high degree of coordination with the select board. The select board puts the warrant together.
Yeah.
Unless you're going to do it as a citizen's petition, it would be better if it was on the regular warrant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You do have the right to do it as a citizen's petition, as does every citizen. So, but a high degree of coordination with the select board and early notice that you're considering doing this
maybe,
would be very appropriate.
don't wait.
And I'll make this part of my report at our next select board meeting, when I report on this meeting, so.
And maybe that's the first, if we wanted to do the next step, would be just a discussion about the
Yeah.
concept with the select board.
Pros and
Before we were like, we want to put this on the warrant article.
I'm
would
sure
be
the chair would love to put it on the agenda and have a conversation with, either do a joint meeting with the Conservation Commission and the Select Board, or have representatives of the Conservation Commission come and present. So,
Or
either way.
Or use you.
You know a little bit about joint meetings because of your role on Swayze Park trustees.
Or just use you as a little bit of a conduit to kind of feel things out.
I
and
will
then
include this in my
see if it's worth taking that next step.
I will definitely include this in my report.
See what the sentiment is.
And let the Select Board know that you are willing to hear their reaction to that.
Yep.
But to be clear, we're talking 2026, right? It's
Yes.
not the
Mhm.
intention
Oh,
of
yeah.
this
No.
board to consider, okay.
This is not
It's
a
too late to
priority.
do a citizens
Right.
petition.
Yeah.
And this is not the type of thing that you jam onto the warrant at the last minute.
No,
Not
we
this
wouldn't.
year.
I don't think the move
There's
is there
nothing
for
that you should jam onto the warrant at the last minute.
Yeah, I don't feel like it's critical enough. I'm like just totally taken by this map, though. There's like just no pattern to
Yeah,
who's got what.
who has, yeah.
I've really been staring at it.
I've
It's
been trying to
like
pick. Is it
demographics.
There's just like, I can't figure out anything.
All,
I didn't
all
even
of the
know.
seacoast
We
is
were at
zero.
the meeting and someone said to me, oh, Exeter doesn't get any money from, the land use tax change. I said, what are you talking about? Of course they do. Exeter? And then they said, no, go out. And we went out. And I said, oh, wow.
Big
Yeah.
surprise.
And you
Kind of
heard,
surprising.
and you heard
To
the
me,
history of it.
philosophically,
The guy that was there.
There's
it
no
makes sense to me philosophically because the land use change tax is
think it's
from a
Yes.
More
development.
political
So
affiliation.
it's sort of like the ARM fund in a
But
way
it's
where
just-
you
exactly.
impact wetlands, you contribute money
That is.
Yes.
to
That is.
wetland restoration. And in this, you're taking away,
Forested
you're developing
or-
part of Exeter,
right.
you're contributing to conserving another part of Exeter.
Yes,
And
So that's why I like it, because philosophically, I think it works.
it makes sense.
Um,
Yeah, to me,
Why
it
wouldn't
makes
we
sense.
try for it?
Yeah.
I will double down on that because that's exactly what I was thinking too. It feels very much like an in lieu fee payment. And the fact that we're now in a very changing landscape where Army Corps is coming to the ARM program, DES, and saying like, we don't want as much focus on conservation, and we're
The ARM fund
prioritizing.
is not doing conservation projects essentially.
There's a much stronger focus coming from up on high to do restoration through that program, and there's a much higher priority to go directly into in lieu. It used to be flipped, where like
Right.
developers would come here and they would say like, what's on your list? And we're like, oh, well, our list, and then they would go to in lieu. Like we don't even get that step anymore.
Just
You
goes
don't
to
see
in lieu.
that. You have to fight for it if you really want it. This is essentially an open space is being removed. Here's money to go protect more open space because it's not on the developers to do it. And it's just like, I agreed, I was like totally in line with Michelle when you were talking about the fact that like it really feels good to be able to go to the voters and say like, how do you want those dollars spent?
Yeah.
Because I totally agree. I love Exeter. I love the fact that it's a very environmentally minded, thoughtful community that really cares about the quality of the resources that we have here. But I also agree in that I think, there's a changing of the winds in a couple of different ways, beyond even the taxes, the fact that like these programs now aren't as generous to us in the terms of how developers have to play. And because of that, I think it's a good time to have this conversation in a very open fashion with the select board and say like, look, this is where we are, and we don't want to be able to lose that financial leverage we have to make good steps because we've been doing a lot of great work along the way.
Yeah, and like you said, it'd be nice to be poised to, if something comes up.
And the Roy property had some specific things going on that didn't allow that to happen.
Right.
Had a lot.
That
So
was very
in some ways,
specific.
it's not an appropriate
Think so?
example.
Just a little bit.
But
Couple years.
on the other hand, if there had been money available, some of the issues that cropped up may not have. So it's hard to say. There were some very specific things
I
going
get
on there.
that.
Yeah.
I just use that as an example of a large chunk that
Don?
could have been preserved.
Yep.
Hello?
Don, you got your hand up?
Yes, I do. Well, we can't see it. That's all. Very great discussion, by the way. There's also another alternative that I'm not recommending we do, but we did do this a few years ago, is you do a conservation bond.
Yes.
And a conservation bond gives you all the money you need, a big pocket full of money right up front. So that's another way to go to try to build up a land purchase, a conservation purchase fund.
Don,
so we did that.
When did
I think $3 million back in 2002.
Yeah.
So that's another alternative to building up your fund, and it builds it up very quickly. It builds it up right away, as opposed to the land use tax. You're at the subject of what's going to be developed or what's being taken out of current use. But maybe these are all discussions, good discussions to have with the select board.
That's actually Amherst, they, $6 million of that money they spent, of the 7, was from a bond. So they blew through that in 2 years. So. But they had a lot of land in town that people were coming to them, was available, and they said, boy, they did, they went for it, so.
Okay. Any committee reports? Property management?
Yes. I will be quick, though. I know we're getting antsy. But there were 2 things I wanted to raise under property management that I thought were important to talk about this month. The first one is I just wanted to let the board know, you may have been aware of the large brush fire that was off of Pine Road that the fire department was. The fire actually blew into Exeter as well, and so there was a portion of conservation land that was affected by the fire.
That like behind Lewisburg Circle?
Yeah, a parcel above it, but quite a ways away. I can't remember the distance away. But as part, the fire was started by someone who was camping out there. Their generator started the fire, and we went out. The fire department, Jason Fritz. I'm so thankful he took this initiative to get some volunteers together to get landowner permission to access the area and go and clean up the site. So that site has now been cleaned up. There was a generator left. There was a fuel tank or a fuel carrier of gas, and then a bunch of debris. And just, I sent a word of thanks, to Justin Pizon so that he is aware, but the level of communication he had with the family of the person who was camping there, because it was kind of like a sad situation, his poise and communication with them was amazing. And I just think that the fire department does so much, but this is just on his own, his initiative to pull this together and get this area cleaned up. On our way back from that, there was a brush fire call for the McDonald Conservation Area. And so I got to see firsthand from a safe distance, the extreme hard work that they do to put these brush fires out. And, it was just last week, it was last Friday. It was a very cold and very windy day. They were out there. They had it almost knocked down, and a wind came, and just to see the flames jump up that quickly was shocking. But they really acted quickly. They were super coordinated, and they did a great job. But it identified a problem, and that problem is something that I take fault for, and that's that we have a gate on the McDonald Conservation Land. The fire department had no idea what the gate code was. They do now. And then the other thing is they don't have access to our conservation gate keys. So I'll be sure that they have that moving forward. But anyway, swift action on their part really protected a huge part of that area, and I'm also very thankful for the passerby who reported it. But I thought you should be aware of it, and I think it's timely. And hopefully we can collectively send our kudos and thanks to the fire department, and specifically Jason Fritz.
Wow.
Yeah, it was.
Do you want to send a letter on behalf of the commission?
Yeah. Sure.
I think we should.
I think that would be great.
What do you think? Send a letter?
Thank you, letter.
gratitude?
Yeah.
Okay. Would you authorize Dave to pen that, or to sign a letter indicating that?
Yeah, I can't write it, but I can sign it.
It's a nice deal.
Would you make a motion to authorize Dave to?
I make a motion to authorize Dave to send a letter to the fire department.
To sign a prepared
Sign,
letter.
just sign a prepared letter.
Just put the stamp on it. Go.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And then I had one other item under property management. So as you know, David O'Hearn had been mowing our conservation lands. He's since retired. I had correspondence with Breen Land Works. Kevin Breen is a participant on the Exeter Tree Committee, and he had reached out a while ago saying, hey, we have equipment to do brush management. So I just said, Kevin, can you give me a ballpark estimate of what it would cost? He went out to our conservation areas, and we have $1,825 in the budget. He estimated $2,200 to do the same work that David does. So we might need to think about a way to pull in some conservation fund or shift some additional funding to support that. So one, kind of a nod to the deal that David was getting us. Two, Kevin said, this is a really good deal. So I think they're both offering us a good deal. So I'm sure if we bid it out, it would be quite a bit more expensive. But the most exciting part was he went to the Irvine property, which is the conservation land on the toe of so you go to the Exeter Country Club, and there's a peninsula that jets out into the Squamscott River that the Wheelwright Creek wraps around. We've been battling Oriental bittersweet on this property very slowly. Progressively, I've seen, it's visible how much progress we've made. He said for $1,750 with an excavator, he could actually go and make much faster progress and really knock back the bittersweet in 1 day's worth of work. So I'm just putting this out there as a potential discussion point to see if there's interest on behalf of the commission to really make a big difference out there. That we're sort of struggling to keep the bittersweet at bay, and we are making some progress, but it's not quick work. We've been working on it since '08 when I started, and probably before that too. So anyway, I just wanted to share those.
To that point, I'm trying to remember if stewardship grants from the Great Bay Protection Partnership cover invasive management. I mean, that seems like a small enough dollar amount that
Yeah, I'll look
and
into
those
that.
grants are generally pretty low bars to clear.
Thank
So
you.
that might be a good place to look into, because that might fit the bill.
Yeah, I had looked at Fish and Game. I know
parcel.
they offer grants, but they require the property be open to hunting, which that parcel is not.
Oh,
so-
interesting. Yep.
Great.
All right, and then we have, I guess, a winter solstice report on a porta potty?
What happens?
With lights on.
Keith,
So we had a winter solstice event
in a porta potty?
and a porta potty. Yep, at Rains Barn on 21st, a Saturday. It's very cold, very windy, but we had a good fire, a good distance from the barn. We had the barn opened up, both floors, decorated with lights, and went very well. We had about 42 people, which was pretty good based on with the weather. And a lot of parents and kids and grandparents and kids, so very encouraging to see that. Went well, lasted a couple hours. Went back the next day, cleaned up all the nails and stuff from the pallets we burned, put it in the dumpster. Once again, Stephen's doing a nice job up there. He's getting close to being done. And we've kind of got, with his permission, all of his equipment sort of in one spot, his tools. So the barn is kind of ready to use. So is that a fair assessment?
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's use it.
How's the concrete coming?
We're waiting on L-Chip's permission.
Correct.
Still
Oh,
have the
Still haven't given it?
We don't. We haven't
Oh,
gotten
okay.
Yeah.
word. I will follow up tomorrow.
Yeah. Still have the jackhammer. We're ready to go.
All right, and then we've got a Hike Exeter announcement. Kyle?
Yep, Kristen has done a lot of work keeping me going, keeping the cart moving, and so we've gone live with it. We have a Hike Exeter Facebook page now, which we've got 50 members of already. We started it yesterday. An interesting thing, the membership question to weed out the bots, I guess, is what's the name of the freshwater portion of the river that goes through Exeter? And people are about 50-50 giving the right answer. But it is the Exeter River, not the Squamscott.
They're putting the Squams on.
Yeah, a lot of people are putting the Squamscott.
It's a trick. They think that's too obvious of
Yeah. As I say, I guess it's not a good idea to make a trick question be the membership anyways. But it seems like it's gotten a good response, and Travel and Nature actually reached out, and Kristen and I are meeting with the new owners on Friday, and they want to see what they can do to help, whether it's merchandise or discounts or help with leading hikes or stuff like that. And the plan is we've released one of the hikes, which is the Henderson-Swayze hike so far. And I think we're going to try and release like one a week as it goes. And so,
Excellent. That's super cool.
Discounts, I wrote discounts.
yeah, whatever we'll take. I mean, I don't even know what to ask for. So whatever they want to offer, I think will be great.
All right, have we got any other committee reports?
Just two items. One, the tree committee you may or may not know, is a subcommittee to the Conservation Commission. They manage and advise on Exeter street trees. It's been a while since they've been back to this board to give an update, so they'd like to come to a future meeting when we have a light agenda to just give an update on their activities. They did apply again this year for a growth award, meaning that, and I suspect it'll be awarded, meaning they've done all of the requirements to be a Tree City USA, but then they've gone over and above those requirements, deserving an honorable mention. So
How many trees this year?
It's actually a pretty big number because we included some Unitil trees. I think we had 23 trees planted with Unitil funds along Holland Way. And so outside of that, I think it was like 12 or 15. It was a lot, and our target was 8, so it was a great accomplishment. A huge part of that was donations. We had some donations of elm trees from actually the chair of Pearpoint Park, Steve Jones. He donated several elm trees that were planted around. These are the Liberty elms that are resistant to Dutch elm disease. And some others. So I won't spoil it all. I'll let them come in and share that with you. So I want to be sure you had that on your radar.
And but your other report is on styrofoam.
Oh, yeah. So we had a great event. The Energy Committee hosted, the Sustainability Advisory Committee hosted a styrofoam collection event where we only announced it 3 weeks prior to the event, so people didn't have a whole lot of stockpile time, but the idea was to capitalize on, retail season and collect all the styrofoam that people get in Christmas presents and other things, collect it and then cart it out to Guilford, which allows communities to drop it off for free. They densify it and then they sell that product as a commodity. We're looking to put on the warrant article a similar unit, so keep your eyes open to that, and we'll have a presentation at the select board next Tuesday, the 21st, next Tuesday.
At the public hearing.
At the public hearing, and then it'll be discussed again at deliberative session. Huge part of this would not have been successful without the volunteer time from Keith to be our transport.
And Dan?
Yeah, but you actually drove to Guilford.
Thank you. So Dan was there.
I just had to drive to the transfer station to get rid of the trash.
It was
Broke up a lot of styrofoam.
incredibly cold day. Incredibly cold day. We still had 62 cars. We transported, it ended up being 11 cubic yards of styrofoam. So imagine like 11 washing machines of a little taller than that actually, of styrofoam to Guilford for that short amount of time, and it was an amazing success. So.
I already have a bag where I'm putting all my styrofoam meat.
Yeah, same.
I was shocked at this is what we were recycling. So I started saving those for the next time we do a collection.
So make sure you buy your eggs in cardboard. That's something you can do.
Yeah, because ultimately the whole idea is to avoid styrofoam where you can, right?
Right, get it at the source, right?
Right. So the SA Sustainability Advisory Committee is talking about hosting additional events. We're still working out logistics, but I think there's strong desire to hold quarterly or some sort of regularity, hold these events.
Yeah, it seemed the people in the cars, many of them were asking for when is the next one.
Absolutely. And I think
That was good.
after the event, there were 12 different emails or phone calls that I fielded of more people I missed it. When's the next one? So
when
there's
Dan's
definitely
available.
desire. Yeah.
And Keith.
Yeah.
Wow.
And the Public Works Department hosted us, and it was a great setup. And Wayne from Public Works
Yeah,
was
Wayne
the
was awesome.
specific person.
Yeah.
What is his last name?
I call him Brother Wayne.
Yeah, Armour.
Yeah, there you go.
Almond. Thank you.
Armin.
ALLMAN.
Thank you, sir. As in the Allman Brothers. So Wayne was great.
Yes, he was.
He was with us the whole 2 hours, and it was a great host out at Public Works.
And the site was critical because if you've ever broken up a piece of styrofoam, little bits of styrofoam go everywhere. They opened the garage bay for us, and then Keith closed the door, and in seconds, leaf blew all the pieces all into one spot, and we vacuumed them up. Or he vacuumed them. So
That's my thing.
It was
Sorry about that.
Yeah, it was very successful.
It was good.
That's right. And Michelle provided them.
All right, we've got some minutes to approve from the 12/11/24 meeting. Has everybody looked those over? Any changes need to be made?
The December one, there's one little thing where Kristen's name became Mr., and it just should be Mrs. Murphy. It's on line something around 60 or something.
60?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
63.
So that's the only, I thought they were good.
It's a good eye.
All right, we'll change that. And I'll make a motion, we approve the minutes from December 11th
As amended.
as amended.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Of course not. Good. Our next meeting is...
I just had one quick thing, sorry to
Oh.
prolong the meeting. I've typically done this, we've typically done the full moon snowshoe in February. We just had a full moon, I think maybe last night or the
Yes.
night before.
Yeah.
So it'd be 28, I'll look at the calendar, but,
It's Wednesday, the 12th, I believe.
so Wednesday, so it would actually be maybe better to do it, sometimes we do it a little bit before, because the moon's still high in the sky earlier. Maybe we've done it typically at Irving at the golf club, but maybe this year we didn't. No one came last year. It was sad. So maybe we need something
It
different.
was sad snow, too.
There was no snow. It was sad last year. So I'm sad. I'm a little sad about the event. But
Well,
maybe rains is
Maybe rains.
Yeah.
this year. So
Well, maybe we just have a moonlight hike, and if it snows, then.
yeah, and it's always
so
been
then
sort
it'll
of
be
a hike,
snowshoe, yeah.
snow, whatever.
Yeah,
So
so I think
maybe it's a moonlight hike. Maybe
something where we have it where we don't cancel it.
Yes, we've always done that, but maybe it's best since we've had maybe less than, well, there's been snow, but almost never snowshoes required.
Right.
So we just call it a full moon hike at Rains in February. So maybe I'll coordinate. Keith, you seem interested.
I am.
Okay. We'll figure this out. We don't need to figure it out right now, but I'll just throw it out there. If anyone else is interested, let me know or speak up.
Calling it a hike is good branding.
Yeah. It's on, I guess, we're on a Exeter hike, so.
Yeah, there you go.
Theme here.
You can say snowshoes optional.
Right.
Yeah.
That's,
And the rec department does rent snowshoes, so.
oh, yeah.
All right. We've got our next meeting, November 11th.
November.
February 11th?
Oh,
See you in
geez.
November.
I thought it was wise to take some time off. I saw the 11. February 11th. Submission deadline is January 31st. It is 9:41, and can we get a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second. I'll second it. All those in favor?
Aye.
Yeah.
Passes unanimously.
Thank you for tuning in to Exeter TV. Exeter TV is the town's public and government access channels, available on Comcast Channels 6 and 22. Channel 6 is your channel. If you have an idea for a program, want to host your own talk show, or submit a film, we're here to get your content on television. On Channel 22, we bring you live and replay coverage of government meetings and other town updates. A third channel, Blue Hawk Media, is operated by SAU 16 and can be found on Channel 8, with all your school sports, events, and meetings. You can watch Exeter TV online at exeternh.tv, Apple TV, and on Roku. Find us on social media for extra content. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell to get notified about live streams and new content. Tune in to our platforms every other Friday to watch the Exeter Biweekly Report, with recaps of recent events, updates from town departments, and messages from nonprofits in your area. If you head to our website, exeternh.tv, we invite you to sign up to our newsletter to receive monthly updates about new content, upcoming meetings, and more. We'd like to thank you for taking the time to watch Exeter TV and hope that you tune in to our other content as well.